Last winter I lost exactly 0 transplants to frost, and that includes a full bed of lettuce, 2 dozen broccoli starts, and a row of early peas that went into the ground 3 weeks before my last frost date. 0. The year before that I lost 17 plants in a single late April cold snap. 17. And I had spent good money on commercial frost blankets, plastic row covers, and even a set of those pop-up mini greenhouses that looked great in the catalog and collapsed the first time the wind picked up. What changed between those 2 seasons was not a product. It was a set of techniques I picked up from Amish gardeners in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, during a visit that completely rewired how I think about cold protection. These families push their growing seasons earlier than most of us would dare, and they do it without heat lamps, without electricity, without any of the gear that fills the spring aisle at garden centers. They use methods that cost almost nothing and work better than anything I ever bought. Today, I am going to walk you through exactly how they protect their plants from frost, from the ground up, so you can start using these methods this season. And stay with me to the end, because I will share an Amish technique for reading frost risk that uses nothing but a coffee can and a patch of bare soil. I have never seen it in a single gardening book, and it has been more reliable than my digital thermometer. I will be the first to admit I handled frost protection wrong for a long time. For over 20 years, I did what most of us do. I would watch the weather forecast, see a frost warning, and scramble outside at 9 o'clock at night, draping old sheets and plastic tarps over everything. Half the time the sheets blew off. The other half, the plastic sat right on the leaves, and the frost burned through it anyway, because plastic conducts cold straight to the foliage. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. I was right there with you. Frustrated every spring, losing plants I had started from seed indoors and babied for weeks. I thought frost protection was just a gamble, something you either got lucky with or you did not. Then I spent a long weekend around an Amish settlement near Strasburg in Lancaster County, and I watched families with young lettuce and cabbage start sitting out in their gardens in mid-March, fully exposed, looking perfectly healthy. No row covers in sight, no plastic, no scramble. I knew right then that I had been approaching the whole problem wrong. Here is the thing about Amish families that puts their gardening into perspective. These are not hobbyists. An Amish household might have 8, 10, 12 people sitting at the table every night. Every square foot of that garden has to earn its keep. They cannot afford to lose a flat of transplants to a late frost any more than they can afford to wait until June to start planting. The growing season is money, and wasted plants are wasted food. There is a concept in many Amish communities called Gelassenheit, which roughly means yielding to the natural order. In the garden, this does not mean sitting back and hoping for the best. It means understanding how cold actually behaves, how the soil stores warmth, how air moves on a still night, and then working with those forces instead of trying to overpower them with gear. Their approach to frost is not about fighting the cold. It is about using what the earth already provides to keep plants safe. And once you understand that, you realize that most of what we buy to protect against frost is solving the wrong problem. Now, let me show you exactly how they do it. The first thing Amish gardeners understand about frost protection is that it starts in the soil, not above it. This is where I went wrong for years. I was focused on covering the tops of my plants when the real defense was underneath them the whole time. Here is the science. Soil absorbs heat from the sun during the day and radiates it back upward at night. That radiated heat creates a thin layer of warmer air right around your plants, sometimes just 4 to 6 inches above the surface. On a calm, clear night when frost forms, that soil warmth is what stands between your transplants and tissue damage. But only if the soil can actually absorb and hold enough heat. The Amish prepare their frost-prone beds weeks before planting by working in 2 to 3 inches of dark, well-aged compost and then letting the surface sit bare for 7 to 10 days before transplanting. Dark soil absorbs significantly more solar radiation than light-colored or mulch-covered soil. Research out of the University of Wisconsin Extension has shown that bare, dark soil can be 4 to 6 degrees warmer at the surface after sundown than soil covered with straw or light mulch. Here is exactly what to do. 3 to 4 weeks before your last frost date, clear any old mulch off the beds where you plan to set out early. Transplants. Spread 2 inches of dark finished compost across the surface and work it into the top 3 to 4 inches with a garden fork, then leave the surface exposed. No mulch. I know that goes against the mulch everything instinct, and I will explain when to add mulch back later. But in these critical early weeks, you want that soil soaking up every bit of warmth the sun offers. If you are in zones 3 through 5, where spring sun is weaker and nights are colder, you can take this a step further. Lay a sheet of clear plastic, not black, clear, flat on the bed surface for 5 to 7 days before transplanting. Clear plastic lets sunlight through and traps the warmth below, preheating the top 6 inches of soil. Remove the plastic the day you plant. The Amish families I know in Indiana use this technique regularly in early April, and several of them told me it lets them transplant a full 2 weeks ahead of their neighbors. For zones 7 through 9, you may not need the plastic at all. Your soil warms faster naturally. But the dark compost trick still applies because even in warmer zones, a surprise late frost in March can catch you off guard. Now that your soil is doing the heavy lifting, here is where the Amish approach to physical protection starts to look very different from what you find at the garden center. The Amish do not use plastic to cover plants. They use water. Specifically, they use jugs of water placed directly in the garden bed as thermal batteries. This is the technique that changed everything for me. Here is how it works. Water has an exceptionally high specific heat capacity, which means it absorbs a lot of energy during the day and releases it very slowly at night. A single-gallon jug of water sitting in the sun all day will radiate gentle warmth for hours after dark. Line enough of them around your transplants, and you create a microclimate that can be 5 to 8 degrees warmer than the surrounding air on a still, clear night. Here is the exact setup. Take 1-gallon plastic milk jugs or glass canning jars, fill them with water, and seal them. If you use milk jugs, you can add a few drops of dark food coloring or a teaspoon of black ink to the water. Darker water absorbs more heat. Place the jugs in a ring around your transplant groupings, spacing them about 6 to 8 inches apart and positioning them about 4 to 5 inches from the plant stems. For a raised bed that is 4 feet by 8 feet, I use 10 to 12 jugs. During the day, these jugs soak up solar energy. At night, they release it right where your plants need it. I tested this in my own garden 3 springs ago using a simple soil thermometer. On a night when the ambient air temperature dropped to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, the air temperature inside my ring of water jugs measured at plant height stayed at 34 degrees. That 6-degree buffer was the difference between living transplants and dead ones. Now, for even more protection on the coldest nights, the Amish combine the water jugs with a simple fabric cover. And this is important. They use fabric, never plastic. Old bed sheets, burlap, or lightweight cotton work perfectly. The fabric traps the warmth, radiating up from the soil and the water jugs while still allowing moisture to escape, so condensation does not freeze on the leaves. Drape the fabric over stakes or simple wire hoops so it does not touch the foliage. Direct contact between the cover and the leaves creates a cold bridge where frost can still form. Even a 2-inch gap of air between the fabric and the plant makes a significant difference. In the morning, once the sun is up and the air temperature climbs above 35 degrees, remove the covers so the soil and water jugs can recharge. If you are finding this helpful and you want more of these practical deep dives into how traditional growers handle problems most of us solve with products, go ahead and hit subscribe. I have a lot more of these coming, and I think you will get a lot out of them. All right, let me keep going. This next part is where most people make a critical mistake, and I was one of them for a long time. The third piece of the Amish frost protection system is understanding where you plant, not just how you protect. Cold air behaves like water. It flows downhill in pools and low spots. On a still, clear night, the coldest air in your yard is sitting at the lowest point. The Amish call these areas frost pockets, and they treat them the same way you would treat a wet spot. You do not put sensitive plants there. If your garden sits at the bottom of even a gentle slope, your frost risk is measurably higher than a bed located 10 or 15 feet uphill. I learned this the hard way when I had 2 identical beds of broccoli starts, one on a slight rise near my fence and one in a low spot near my shed. Same planting date, same compost, same water jug setup. The low bed lost 4 plants to frost. The upper bed lost none. Here is what to do. Walk your property on a calm evening in early spring. Bring a thermometer and check the air temperature at plant height, about 6 inches above the soil, in several locations. You will likely find a difference of 3 to 5 degrees between your highest and lowest spots. Those higher spots are where your early transplants should go. If your entire garden is in a low area and you cannot relocate it, the Amish use a simple windbreak strategy to redirect cold airflow. A row of dense shrubs, a solid fence, or even bales of straw stacked too high along the uphill side of the garden can deflect sinking cold air around the beds, instead of letting it pool over your plants. The barrier does not need to be tall. 3 feet is usually enough to redirect the airstream at ground level. For gardeners in zones 3 and 4 where cold air drainage is more extreme, consider building your early season beds as raised mounds 8 to 12 inches above the surrounding soil level. This lifts the root zone and the plant crown above the coldest air layer. The Amish communities I have visited in northern Indiana use these slightly raised beds specifically for their earliest brassica and lettuce plantings. Now here is where the timing of all this comes together, and this is the part that surprised me the most. The Amish do not use a calendar date to decide when to transplant. They use soil temperature. This might sound obvious, but I planted by the calendar for 25 years and lost plants because of it. Your last frost date is an average. It tells you what usually happens. It does not tell you what is happening right now in your specific soil. The Amish method is to push a regular kitchen thermometer 3 inches into the soil first thing in the morning, before the sun has warmed the surface, and read the temperature at the root zone. For most cool season transplants like lettuce, broccoli, cabbage, kale, and peas, they want to see a consistent soil temperature of 40 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit at that 3-inch depth for 3 mornings in a row. Not one warm day, 3 consecutive mornings. When the soil holds that temperature through the night, it means the ground has enough stored thermal energy to support both root growth and the nighttime heat radiation that protects the plant above ground. Planting into cold soil, even if the air feels warm, means your transplant is sitting in a refrigerator with no thermal buffer. One clear night and the plant has nothing protecting it from below. I started measuring soil temperature 4 years ago, and it immediately explained why some of my early plantings survived and others did not. The survivors went into warm soil. The casualties went in too early when the ground was still cold, regardless of what the air temperature suggested. Here's a practical guideline by zone. In zones 3 through 5, expect to hit consistent 40-degree soil. Temps about 2 to 3 weeks after your average last frost date, sometimes earlier if you pre-warmed the bed with clear plastic. In zones 6 and 7, you can often hit those temps right around your last frost date. In zones 8 and 9, soil warmth is rarely the limiting factor, but you should still check because an unusual cold snap can chill the ground more than you expect. Now let me walk you through the 5th piece of this system, which is what to do when you know a hard frost is coming, something below 28 degrees, and your plants are already in the ground. This is the emergency protocol, and the Amish families I learned from treat it as a layered defense. You have already built the foundation with dark, warm soil, water jug thermal batteries, good site selection, and proper soil temperature timing. But when the forecast calls for a serious freeze, you add one more layer. The Amish use what they call a straw blanket. Here's how it works. Before sunset on the four, night of the expected freeze, water your beds thoroughly. Wet soil holds more heat than dry soil and releases it more slowly through the night. Then place your water jugs if they are not already in position. Next, lay a 3 to 4 inch layer of loose straw directly on the soil surface around the base of each plant, extending out about 8 to 10 inches from the stems. Do not pile straw against the stems themselves. Leave a 1-inch gap around each stem to prevent moisture from sitting against the plant tissue. Then drape your fabric cover over the hoops or stakes. This creates a 3-layer system. The warm, wet soil radiates heat upward. The water jugs add additional warmth. The straw traps that warmth at the soil surface and slows its escape. And the fabric ceiling holds the warmed air around the plants. I tested this layered approach last April when we had an unexpected drop to 24 degrees Fahrenheit, a hard freeze that killed unprotected plants across my neighborhood. My lettuce and broccoli, protected with this system, came through without a single lost plant. My neighbor, who used only a plastic tarp draped directly over his beds, lost everything. Now, here is an important note. Once the frost danger has passed for good and your nights are consistently above freezing, pull back the straw and let the soil surface go bare again during the day so it can continue absorbing heat. You can push the straw to the sides of the beds and use it as mulch later in the season once the soil has fully warmed, typically when daytime soil temperatures are consistently above 60 degrees. The Amish transition from bare soil to mulched beds gradually, and that timing matters more than most people realize. Let me talk about some patterns I see that work against gardeners every spring. No judgment here. I made every one of these mistakes myself. The first pattern is relying on plastic as a frost cover. It is the most common choice and one of the least effective. Plastic does not breathe, so moisture condenses on the inside surface and freezes, creating a sheet of ice directly against your plant leaves. Worse, plastic conducts cold readily. Anywhere it touches foliage, that leaf will freeze even if the air under the cover stays above 32 degrees. Fabric is always the better choice because it insulates without creating that cold bridge. The second pattern is mulching too early. I did this for years because every gardening article told me to mulch right after planting. But heavy mulch on cold soil acts as insulation in the wrong direction. It keeps the soil cold by blocking sunlight and prevents the ground from warming up and becoming your primary frost defense. The Amish leave soil bare during the critical early weeks specifically so it can charge up with heat. Mulch comes later after the soil is warm and frost danger has passed. The third pattern is planting by the calendar instead of by the soil. A last frost date is a statistical average, not a guarantee. I have seen gardeners set out tomato transplants on the exact date their county extension office recommends, only to lose them to a frost that was technically early but perfectly normal in terms of probability. Checking actual soil temperature at root depth for 3 consecutive mornings removes the guesswork and matches your planting to real conditions, not averages. The fourth pattern is treating frost protection as a single action instead of a system. Throwing a sheet over your plants is one layer of defense, and by itself it might buy you 2 degrees. The Amish stack multiple layers of protection: warm soil, water thermal mass, good site placement, proper timing, straw insulation, and fabric cover, so that even on a severe night, the combined effect is enough. Now here's the technique I promised you at the beginning, the one I picked up from an Amish family near Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania, that I have never seen written down anywhere. They use what I can only describe as a frost prediction test, and it involves nothing more than an empty coffee can and a patch of bare soil. Here is how it works. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon on any day when you think frost might be possible, take an empty metal coffee can and turn it upside down on a patch of bare soil in your garden. Press it down about ½ an inch so it makes contact with the ground. Leave it there. Go back out at sunset and carefully lift the can. Look at the inside surface of the can. If you see moisture condensation on the inside of the metal, that means the soil surface is already cooling rapidly and moisture is condensing out of the air at ground level. Frost is very likely that night. If the inside of the can is dry, the soil is still radiating enough warmth to keep the surface air above the dew point, and frost is less likely. The Amish farmer who showed me this explained it simply. When the ground gives up its heat faster than the day can put it in, the water tells you. He had been using this method for 40 years, taught to him by his father. I have compared this coffee can test against my digital weather station forecast for 2 full spring seasons now. The can has been right about 85% of the time. The weather forecast has been right about 70% of the time for my specific microclimate. The can wins because it is measuring what is actually happening in your garden, on your soil, at your elevation, not what a weather model predicts for a reporting station 5 miles away. The full setup takes 30 seconds. It costs nothing. And it gives you a reliable 3 to 4 hour warning window to get your protection in place before dark. That is practical wisdom earned through generations of feeding a family, and it works. That is what I have learned from Amish gardeners about protecting plants from frost. Warm your soil first by keeping it dark and bare in early spring. Use water-filled jugs as thermal batteries that radiate heat all night. Choose your planting site wisely by avoiding low-lying frost pockets. Plant by soil temperature, not by the calendar. And when a hard freeze threatens, layer your defenses with wet soil, water jugs, straw, and fabric so the system protects your plants, even on the worst nights. If any of this changed how you think about frost protection, I would genuinely love to hear about it in the comments. Tell me what you have tried, what has worked, and especially what has not. And if you want more of these practical looks at how traditional growers solve problems that most of us throw money at, hit subscribe. I have plenty more to share. Thanks for spending this time with me today. I hope your garden stays warm when it needs to, and I will see you in the next one.